Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is about Jaguar X-type power steering fluid change and flushing the power steering system. I took it while desperately waiting for my summer annual leave, when I was going to replace the alternator and take a video about it. Meanwhile, if you are fond of my Jaguar X-type maintenance experiments, just watch this video to the end. First of all, I jacked up the car so that I could easily steer the wheel. I put the car on wooden cubes I utilize as jack stands. Both the sides of the car, the passenger side and the driver side. The car's front end is raised above the ground just as high as it is enough for the wheels to be steered from lock to lock. After the preparatory works were completed, I unfastened the bolts securing the power steering cooler. I made use of the cooler return hose as the lowest point of the system to drain the power steering fluid. There are two 8mm bolts on both ends of the cooler, which can be easily unscrewed using an 8mm socket with an extension. So the cooler pipe was lowered. There is a good access to it from behind the front bumper. And I squeezed the clamp securing the return hose with pliers. It's high time now to open the reservoir and let the fluid easily drain from the system. Moreover, I took an old fluid out with a medical syringe so that to prevent it from going through the whole steering system. I removed the return hose and drained the fluid from both the cooler and the hose itself into two old cans I found in the barn from the time of my previous steering system flushing. After the fluid drained completely, I went on removing the reservoir and cleaning it. I unscrewed two 10mm nuts securing the reservoir, removed it from its place and went on disconnecting the hoses. I squeezed the suction hose clamp with pliers and drew it aside. Using the same pliers, I gripped the hose, twisted it until it slided from the reservoir port. I raised the end of the hose to avoid any fluid leakage. The same I did to the return hose, gripped the clamp, drew it aside and removed the hose with a pair of pliers. After that, I started cleaning the reservoir. I flushed it with gasoline several times, pouring a new portion into it, until the fluid coming out became almost as clean and transparent as fresh. The last portion I poured in was isopropyl alcohol. I took utmost care when working with gas. You know, these fluids are highly flammable. I blew the remnants of them out of the reservoir with compressed air at the nearest garage and dried the reservoir with a hairdryer. Here I show you the OEM number of the reservoir, which can be clearly seen inside it. I installed a clean and dry reservoir to where it belongs. First, I connected a return hose to its port. You see, it's not easy to work and let the cameraman view what you are doing and take a video of it. So I slided the hose with pliers and fixed it with a clamp. The same went for the suction hose. I inserted the port into it and put a clamp to fix the connection. I installed the grommets and the bushing in their place and fastened the reservoir with nuts. After the reservoir was installed, I plugged an appropriate bolt into the return hose to prevent the fluid from draining out through the return line and went on flushing the system. I filled the reservoir with fresh fluid, start-stopped the engine several times, taking care that the reservoir never be empty, adding fluid each time. The same I did when steering the wheel lock to lock until the fresh fluid came out of the cooler pipe. Finally, I filled up the reservoir and removed the bolt plugged into the return hose. I connected the return hose to the cooler and put a clamp on it using pliers. I secured the cooler in its place with the same two 8mm bolts, nothing to add, you can see everything with your own eyes. I filled up the reservoir once again and started the engine, taking care that the reservoir should never be dry. I had some half a liter of fluid remaining, so I preferred to take fluid from the reservoir once again and pour fresh fluid instead. To tell you the truth, I didn't quite like its color. Finally, I started the engine and made sure that the fluid into the power steering reservoir is at a proper level. After all, bubbles of trapped air came out and the wheel was steered lock to lock again and again. You know I'm fond of experiments and I couldn't complete this video without it. So I got an HDD magnet and put it into the power steering reservoir like this to attract all the metal scraps circulating into the system. I cannot tell you in advance whether it will work or not and if something goes wrong with the magnet. I plan to take a video about the results of these experiments in the future. Just follow along and stay tuned.